Welcome to Lesson 3, Plot Outstanding Principal and Find a Regression Equation. Our objectives are to create a scatter plot in Excel, add a regression line, and then determine the appropriate line. You'll see when we go into Excel that there's different types of regression lines that we can add and find the most appropriate one and test it to make sure it's okay. Here are some examples of scatter plots with different lines. If you recall from your earlier math, we have linear lines that are straight, quadratic, make a U. We also have cubic, and they make a little bit of a S-curve, like this one up here. So we're going to be looking at all of those today. Our first set of data. We have an amortization schedule here showing the unpaid balance at the end of the year, each year, over 5 years. And you can see that at the end of year 1, the unpaid balance was $836.20. Each year, they made a payment, and that payment is split between interest and principal, as you know. The principal reduces the unpaid balance each year. So what I want to do is graph the unpaid balance at the end of the year, the unpaid principal balance per year over here. So let's go into an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll show you how to get started. All right. So let's go ahead and start here. And what I've done is I've listed each year, 1 through 5, and I've listed the unpaid principal balance in the next column. Let's go ahead and format some of this so it looks a little bit nicer. So what I'm doing is highlighting my titles, and then if I go to the main screen up here, you can see, move that up a little bit, you can see the icons that we have. What I'm doing is I'm going home, I'm clicking on bold, and then I want to center those as well as put a line underneath. So I'm going to put a bottom border, and then notice that things don't really fit. So I'm going to right click on those cells, I'm going to format my cells, and then you'll notice over here the alignment feature, and in here I can wrap the text, and then I say OK. That looks a lot better to me. So that's just visual. It's up to you to format that or not. Now let's get to the charts. I want to make a scatter plot, so I'm going to highlight my titles as well as all my data. Then I go to charts. The next step is to go to scatter plots and then click on this marked scatter plot. And you'll notice that Excel will create a scatter plot for you. It's very nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that we can see it better. And then what I want to do is I want to put a trend line on here. I can't really tell what type of equation should go here, so I'm going to try a couple of different trend lines. The way to do that is to click on one of the dots, one of the pieces of data, and you'll notice that they all become highlighted. Then if I go up to the very top, and you can't see it on here, but on the very top menu on Excel you have File, Edit, View, Insert, Format Tools, and then Chart. So I'm clicking on that Chart menu. And then you can see where it says Add Trend Line. That's going to be a very important place to go for all of these. So I'm going to add trend line. Now you'll notice with my trend lines that I have some different options here. The first one, the most important, is the type. Do I want to add a logarithmic, a polynomial, a power, an exponential, or a moving average? Well, we're going to stick to linear and polynomial. So let's say I wanted to do a linear. Well, it put one on there actually right when I clicked on it, and you can see that it's pretty close to the data, but the data is still not quite on there, so I'm not sure it's linear. So now I'm going to click on polynomial, and that looks pretty good. Notice over here it says order 2. Order 2 means that it's to the second degree, like a quadratic. So this could be the right one. So I think I'm going to try this one. Well, then I'm going to go to options because I want to know what that equation is. If I click on options, then I can click on display equation on chart, and if you'll notice down here, now I have a quadratic equation that represents this line, this trend line, this line of best fit, or in other words called a regression line. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Now what I want to do is I want to see this regression line a little bit bigger so we can adjust some of the format. What I can do is I can double click on the regression line and it will pull up a formatting window. So if I go to font, I can change the font size. I'm going to go ahead and change it to 16 so that it's bigger. So everything in this Excel chart you can format. You can change the color, you can change the size. You may just have to play around a little bit. So there we have it. There is a scatter plot with a trend line. But let me show you one other type because maybe this isn't going to be the right trend line. So let's actually do this again. I'm going to highlight my data and I'm going to click on scatter, marked scatter, remember. I've got another scatter plot here that I'm going to make a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to click on one of the pieces of data. At the very top of Excel, I'm going to hit Chart, Add Trend Line. This time, under Polynomial, instead of order of 2, I'm going to go up and change that to 3. I'm going to change it to be a cubic function. And notice, if I look over here, that fits pretty well too. So I'm going to try one like that. So again, go to Options, Display Equation, and click OK. I'm going to make my equation bigger so that I can read it. And we'll make it 16 again and click OK. All right, so now I have my equation here. And I can move my equation so that it's in a little different location, maybe up here so it's out of the way of the rest of my line. All right, I have two regression equations. Which one is better? Well, I know that in year 5, my unpaid principal balance is 0. If we look at these equations, what does the x-axis represent? Hopefully you're saying years. What does the y-axis represent? Hopefully there you're saying the unpaid principal balance. So after 5 years, if my unpaid principal balance is 0 right here, then probably in these equations, if I plug in 5, I should get 0. And if I happen to get 0 for both, then I might try another number, like 3, because I know that if I plug 3 into one of these equations, I should get $457.82. So let's try that. Okay, so I've put together a little bit of calculation here. So I've taken our first graph. This is our quadratic. This is to the second power. And I've plugged in 5 everywhere that you see x. So you can see 5 squared and 5. And then I've simplified as we went down. And I came to negative 0.3975. So very close to 0. And you have to remember that in here there's a degree of rounding. Our Excel worksheet rounded it a little bit. And then when we multiply, things also get rounded. So it's not going to come out to be exactly 0, but hopefully very close. Now I would look at that and say that's pretty close to 0. But then look what happened when I did the cubic function here. So when I plugged in 5, raised it to the third power, here to the second, and here to the first, and then simplified all the way down, being careful to keep as many decimal places as I can, I ended up with a value of only 0.285. This is closer to 0 than the quadratic. So I would then say that this line of best fit is probably superior to this one. So I would give it this regression line to be most accurate. Okay, so that concludes our lesson on plotting outstanding principal and finding a regression line. So now you know how to create a scatter plot in Excel, add a regression line, and determine which line is the appropriate line for the data. In your business, you are going to have to print off different regression lines in order to determine which one is the most appropriate.